In 1986, a young girl and her father from Dallas, Texas, vanished during a weekend road trip, leaving the mother at home with unimaginable grief and unanswered questions for over a decade. But 14 years later, a junkyard owner finds something shocking among the discarded cars, a haunting discovery that would change everything. The autumn sun filtered through the windows of Catherine Morrison's living room in Dallas, Texas, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Catherine sat quietly on her floral-patterned sofa, the television remote clutched tightly in her hand. Her mother Linda perched beside her, her face etched with the same anticipation and dread that had become ritual on this day each year. "It's almost time," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible as she increased the volume on the television. The local news program flickered on screen, and Catherine leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the set. For 14 years she had paid local news stations to broadcast a missing persons alert on this day, the anniversary of when her family was torn apart. As the commercial segment began, Catherine's breath caught in her throat. The screen displayed a family photograph, a handsome man with a thick mustache and warm eyes standing proudly beside a small girl with a bright smile. Beside the photo was an image of a gleaming blue Lincoln Continental. 14 years ago today, Michael Morrison and his 7-year-old daughter Emma disappeared during a weekend road trip, the announcer's voice stated. They were last seen driving a 1980 blue Lincoln Continental license plate, DMK 247. If you have any information regarding their whereabouts, please contact the Dallas Police Department. Catherine clicked off the television, unable to bear the weight of the silence that followed. She glanced at her mother, noting the grim expression that had settled on her lined face. "I'll go upstairs to freshen up," Linda said, squeezing Catherine's hand before rising slowly from the couch. Catherine nodded, watching as her mother disappeared up the stairs. Left alone with her thoughts, Catherine crossed to the bookshelf that lined the far wall of the living room. Her fingers trailed across the spines of several books before stopping at a worn, leather-bound photo album. She pulled it down and returned to the sofa, opening it with the care one might afford a sacred text. Page after page revealed moments frozen in time. Michael standing proudly next to that Lincoln he'd worked so hard to afford. Emma on her first day of school. The three of them at White Rock Lake, their faces alight with joy. Catherine traced the outline of her daughter's face with a trembling finger. "Where are you?" she whispered to the photograph as she had countless times before. The shrill ring of the telephone cut through the silence, startling Catherine. She closed the album and set it aside before crossing to the kitchen to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Officer Thompson with the Dallas Police Department," came the reply. "I'm calling because we've just received a report of potential evidence being found at a junkyard in Waco. We believe it could be related to your husband and daughter's case." Catherine's free hand clutched the counter for support. "What kind of evidence?" "We'd prefer not to discuss details over the phone, ma'am. Would you be available to come identify what's been found? We can have a patrol car pick you up in about 10 minutes. "Yes," Catherine replied immediately, her heart pounding. "Yes, I'll be ready." She hung up the phone and hurried to the bottom of the stairs. "Mom," she called out. "The police just called. They found something at a junkyard in Waco. They think it might be connected to Michael and Emma." Linda appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. "What did they find?" "They wouldn't say, but they're sending a car to pick us up in 10 minutes. Linda descended the stairs quickly, her earlier weariness forgotten. "I'm coming with you." They waited in tense silence until the patrol car arrived. The officer at the wheel introduced himself as Officer Garcia, but offered little conversation during the hour-long drive south to Waco. Catherine watched the familiar Texas landscape pass by in a blur, her thoughts racing with possibilities. Beside her, Linda clutched her purse tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. When they finally arrived at Patterson's Auto Salvage, Catherine's stomach twisted at the sight of police vehicles and yellow crime scene tape, cordoning off a section of the junkyard. Officer Garcia led them through the maze of junked vehicles toward a cluster of people gathered around something Catherine couldn't yet see. "Detective Foster," Officer Garcia called out as they approached. "Mrs. Morrison and her mother are here." A tall man in plain clothes turned to greet them, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Chen, I'm Detective Foster. Thank you for coming so quickly." "What did you find?" Catherine asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Detective Foster stepped aside, revealing what the group had been surrounding. Catherine's legs nearly gave out beneath her. There, crushed almost beyond recognition, but still unmistakable, was a blue Lincoln Continental. The once gleaming paint was now dull and rusted in places, but there was no doubt in Catherine's mind. This was Michael's car, the one he had saved for years to buy, the one he had lovingly maintained, the one he and Emma had driven away 14 years ago. "Oh my God," Linda whispered beside her, gripping Catherine's arm for support. Catherine approached the vehicle slowly, as if in a trance. The car had been partially crushed, presumably by the large excavator parked nearby. Police officers were photographing every angle of the vehicle, while others appeared to be taking measurements and searching the area around it. "We can't check the interior because of the condition," Detective Foster explained gently, "but we need to confirm. Is this your husband's car, Mrs. Morrison?" Catherine circled the vehicle, her eyes scanning every detail. Finally, she stopped at what remained of the right rear wheel. She pointed to a small dent in the chrome wheel cover. "Michael was a wonderful dentist," she began. "He had this way with patients, especially children. They weren't afraid of him. He'd tell silly jokes and wear these ridiculous ties with tooth patterns on them." A small smile touched Tyler's lips. "Sounds like a character." "He was," Catherine agreed. "And Emma, she was so full of life, smart, curious about everything. She was a little fashionista, even at 7 years old, always concerned about how she looked, what she wore." "That's why she loved that pink bag so much?" Tyler asked, nodding toward the backpack in Catherine's lap. "Yes," Catherine replied, stroking the nylon surface. "She saved her allowance for weeks to buy it. It was from the Hello Kitty accessory collection, a limited edition. She carried it everywhere." Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed Michael and Emma standing in front of the blue Lincoln. Michael's arm was around his daughter's shoulders, his mustache prominent above his wide smile. Emma beamed at the camera, her yellow dress bright against the car's blue paint. "This is them," Catherine said, holding out the photo for Tyler to see. "This was taken about a month before they disappeared." Tyler barely looked at the photo before returning his eyes to the road. "Nice-looking family," he commented. "She was missing her 2 front teeth, and—" he inhaled deeply as if savoring the thought, "that yellow polka dot dress." Catherine froze, her eyes darting to Tyler's face. He had barely glanced at the photo, not long enough to notice such specific details, and she hadn't mentioned that the polka dots were on Emma's dress, or that it was her front teeth that were missing. In the back seat, Linda had gone completely still. Catherine could feel her mother's eyes boring into the back of Tyler's head. "Yes," Catherine said carefully, returning the photo to her purse with trembling hands. "That's right." The rest of the drive passed in uncomfortable silence. Catherine noticed Tyler frequently glancing at her through the rearview mirror, though each time she looked up, his eyes would dart back to the road. She wasn't sure if he was watching her or the pink backpack she held. When they finally reached Catherine's house in North Dallas, the relief was palpable. Tyler pulled up to the curb and put the truck in park. "Here we are, safe and sound," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you again," Catherine said, her voice carefully neutral as she opened the door. "For everything." "My pleasure," Tyler replied. "Let me know if you need anything else." "I'm in the book, Tyler Bennett." Linda had already exited the back seat and stood waiting on the sidewalk. Catherine joined her, and they both watched as Tyler drove away, his truck disappearing around the corner. Without a word, they hurried up the walkway to the house. Catherine's hands shook as she unlocked the door, and once inside, she quickly locked it behind them, sliding the deadbolt into place. "Did you hear what he said in the car?" Linda asked immediately, her voice barely above a whisper despite the fact they were alone. "About Emma's teeth and the polka dot dress." Catherine nodded, sinking into the nearest chair, the pink backpack still clutched in her hands. He couldn't have seen those details from just glancing at the photo while driving. Linda leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Catherine, is there any possibility that Tyler could have known Emma or Michael? That he's hiding something?" "Mom, that's a terrible accusation," Catherine said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We don't have any evidence. Maybe he has sharp eyes. It could be some people have photographic memories." They were both silent. Catherine stared down at the backpack, turning it over in her hands. "If this was really Emma's backpack, it would have her name in it," she said slowly. "Remember, I used to write her name with a permanent marker on all her belongings, so they wouldn't get switched with her friends. I remember, Linda nodded. She was very angry when I wanted to write her name in this backpack, Catherine continued, a distant smile touching her lips at the memory. So we decided to stick a sticker inside for identification instead. She looked up at her mother. Plus, this bag style was quite popular back then. I bought her the original limited edition Sanrio Hello Kitty accessory pack. We saw other children her age with similar bags in different colors. There were even other brands that made similar models and sold them at department stores. Linda nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Still, it's an awful lot of coincidences, don't you think? Catherine fell silent, running her fingers along the seams of the backpack. The material felt right, exactly as she remembered Emma's bag, and the white tag inside with its mysteriously erased printing. Let's go to an antique shop, Linda said suddenly. Have an expert check this bag. If it's truly a vintage piece from the 80s, they'll be able to tell us, and we'll go to the police. Catherine considered this for a moment, then nodded decisively. You're right. Let's get an expert opinion. If this really is from the Sanrio limited edition collection, someone who knows vintage items would be able to confirm it. She rose from her chair, the pink backpack still in her hand. I'll get the car keys, Catherine said, her voice stronger now. There's that antique shop on Henderson Avenue. If we hurry, we can get there before they close. Linda stood as well, her earlier exhaustion seemingly forgotten in the face of this new lead. Let's go. We need to know what we're dealing with. As they headed for the door, Catherine clutched the pink backpack tightly. Catherine's sedan pulled out of the driveway and into the golden light of the late afternoon. She gripped the steering wheel tightly while Linda sat beside her. The pink backpack nestled securely in her lap. Henderson Antiques should still be open, Catherine said, checking her watch. Mr. Walsh has always been knowledgeable about vintage collectibles. Traffic was moderate as they made their way across town, neither woman speaking much. The weight of the day's discoveries hung between them. First Michael's crushed Lincoln, and now this backpack that so closely resembled Emma's prized possession. Do you really think this could be Emma's bag? Linda asked quietly, tracing the white trim with her fingertip. Catherine kept her eyes on the road. I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. If it was Emma's and Tyler was lying, why would he keep it all these years? 20 minutes later, they pulled into the small parking lot of Henderson Antiques, a modest storefront wedged between a bakery and a hardware store. A bell jingled as they pushed open the door, and the scent of old books and furniture polish enveloped them. The shop was cluttered but organized, with glass display cases containing jewelry and small collectibles, while larger furniture pieces were arranged throughout the open space. A man in his 60s looked up from behind the counter, smiling in recognition. Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Chen, he greeted them. What a pleasant surprise. How can I help you ladies today? Hello, Mr. Walsh, Catherine replied. We were hoping you might be able to tell us something about this backpack. She gestured to Linda, who placed the pink bag on the counter. Mr. Walsh adjusted his glasses and peered down at it. Interesting piece. Children's accessory. Circa early 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. He turned it over in his hands. But this isn't really my specialty. Let me call David from the back. He's much better with these sorts of items. He disappeared through a curtained doorway, returning a moment later with a younger man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. This is David Martinez, Mr. Walsh explained. He's our specialist for vintage toys and collectibles. His wife is a serious Hello Kitty collector, so if anyone can identify this piece properly, it's him. Ladies, David nodded in greeting. Let's have a look at what you've brought. He took the backpack and carried it to a better-lit section of the counter. With practiced hands, he examined the material, the stitching, and the hardware of the clasp. He opened it and checked the interior, his fingers tracing along the seams. May I ask what specifically you'd like to know about this item? He asked, looking up at Catherine and Linda. We'd like to confirm if it's an original Sanrio product from their limited edition Hello Kitty accessory line in the early 1980s, Catherine explained, and if possible the exact year it was produced. David nodded and returned his attention to the bag. He pulled a jeweler's lope from his pocket and examined the stitching more closely. The quality of the nylon and the stitching pattern is consistent with Sanrio's production standards from that era, he said. The specific pink color was part of their Hello Kitty Adventure collection, if I recall correctly. He continued his examination, checking the zipper and hardware. The zipper pull has the characteristic Sanrio shape from that period. He reached for his phone. Let me call my wife quickly. She'll know more specific details. As David stepped away to make the call, Catherine and Linda exchanged hopeful glances. He seems to think it's authentic, Linda whispered. But that doesn't prove it's Emma's, Catherine cautioned. Just that it's from the right time period. David returned a few minutes later, setting his phone down. My wife confirms this is almost certainly from the Sanrio Hello Kitty accessory collection, specifically from their 1985 to 1986 limited edition run. They only produced this particular shade of pink for about 6 months. He turned his attention to the white tag inside the bag. This is interesting though, he said, frowning slightly. The identification tag has been tampered with. Tampered with. Catherine leaned closer. David nodded, pointing to the tag with a pen. See how the fabric is slightly puckered around the edges, and this discoloration here. He indicated several spots on the small white ribbon. It appears someone deliberately removed the printing, likely using some kind of heat treatment, probably a household iron. He turned the tag toward the light. You can still see where the ink was. The heat weakened and essentially plasticized the surface of the tag. It doesn't smell of burning polyester anymore, but the damage pattern is characteristic of heat application. He pointed to the surrounding fabric. There's also slight physical wear showing signs of damage to the lining around the tag, also consistent with heat treatment. Someone deliberately attempted to remove whatever identifying information was printed here. Catherine's heart pounded. Could it have just faded naturally over time? David shook his head. No, this is deliberate. Natural fading would affect the entire tag uniformly. This shows concentrated damage specifically where the printing would have been. He looked up at them curiously. If you don't mind my asking, why is this particular bag so important? Catherine hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. It's very similar to one my daughter had many years ago. I was curious if it could be the same model. David nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. Well, I can tell you with confidence that this is an original Sanrio product from their 1985 to 1986 line. My wife would be happy to provide more details if you'd like to bring it by sometime when she's here. Thank you, Catherine said, her voice slightly unsteady. You've been extremely helpful. David carefully handed the bag back to her. Is there anything else you'd like to know about it? No, that's all we needed, Linda replied, reaching for her purse. What do we owe you for your time? David waved away the suggestion. Nothing at all. Always happy to help identify a vintage piece. They thanked both men and made their way back to the car. Once inside, with the doors closed, Linda turned to Catherine, her expression grave. Catherine, someone deliberately removed the identification from this bag, she said quietly. Catherine stared down at the backpack in her lap, her fingers tracing the outline of the heat-damaged tag. I know. We need to take this to the police, Linda said firmly. They need to know about Tyler's connection to both Michael's car and this bag. Catherine nodded slowly. You're right. Even if this isn't Emma's, even if Tyler's daughter really did just receive it from a school friend, the police should know. She started the car, her hands steadier, now that they had a plan. We'll go straight to the police station. Detective Foster should still be there. As they pulled out of the parking lot, the pink backpack rested between them. Catherine's mind filled with questions about Tyler Bennett and his connection to her family's disappearance, questions she hoped the police might finally be able to answer. They had only driven a few blocks from the antique shop when Catherine noticed the brake warning light illuminate on her dashboard. The car began to shudder slightly, and she frowned. That's strange, she murmured, tapping the brake pedal experimentally. The response felt sluggish. What's wrong? Linda asked, looking up from the pink backpack she'd been examining. I'm not sure, the brake light just came on. Catherine pressed the pedal again, and this time it went almost to the floor. Something's definitely not right. The car began to lose power as they approached an intersection. Catherine quickly signaled and pulled over to the side of the road before the vehicle could completely stall out. She put it in park and turned off the ignition, then tried to restart it. The engine sputtered but wouldn't catch. This has never happened before, Catherine said, confused. She stepped out of the car and walked around to the front, opening the hood. Steam wasn't coming out, and nothing looked obviously wrong to her untrained eye, but she knew something serious had failed. Should we call a tow truck? Linda asked, joining her daughter at the front of the car. I suppose we'll have to, Catherine replied, reaching for her cell phone. So much for getting to the police station tonight. As she was about to dial, a pickup truck pulled over behind them. Catherine's stomach tightened as she recognized Tyler Bennett climbing out of the driver's side. A second man, taller with a heavier build, emerged from the passenger door. "Catherine? Linda?" Tyler called, approaching them with a look of concern. "Everything okay? I was just driving by and saw you pulled over." Catherine forced a smile, though unease prickled at the back of her neck. What a coincidence. "We're having some car trouble. The brake light came on, and then the car just lost power." Tyler and his friend moved to the front of the car, peering under the hood. "This is my buddy Nathan," Tyler said, gesturing to the other man. "He's pretty good with cars." Nathan nodded at them before bending to examine the engine. What happened exactly? Catherine repeated the symptoms, while Nathan prodded at various components. After a few minutes, he straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Looks like your brake line is leaking fluid," he said, "and it might have affected your transmission too. Not safe to drive like this." "Can you fix it here?" Catherine asked. Nathan shook his head. "Nah, this needs proper tools. Parts too, probably." Tyler stepped forward. "Where were you headed? Maybe we can give you a lift." "We were going to the police station, actually," Linda said, clutching her purse tightly. "The police station?" Tyler's eyebrows rose. "Everything okay?" "Yes, just some follow-up about Michael's car," Catherine said vaguely, reluctant to mention the backpack. "Well, I can call for a tow and have your car brought to the junkyard," Tyler offered. "We've got all the tools there and I can get it fixed up for you, probably cheaper than a regular garage too." "That's very kind," Catherine began. "But we'd like to go to the police station first," Linda interrupted firmly. "We can deal with the car afterward." Tyler and Nathan exchanged a quick glance that Catherine almost missed. "Mom," Catherine said, touching Linda's arm. "Maybe it makes more sense to deal with the car first. We can always call Detective Foster from the junkyard if needed." "Catherine's right," Tyler said smoothly. "No sense letting the car sit out here all night. Let me call our tow truck and we'll get this sorted out." Before either woman could protest further, Tyler had pulled out his phone and made a call. "They'll be here in about 10 minutes, he announced after a brief conversation. The next several minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. Catherine could feel Linda's disapproval radiating beside her, and she could understand her mother's sudden hostility toward Tyler. Yes, the coincidences were troubling, but Tyler had been nothing but helpful since they'd met, and maybe he could explain about the bag to police too. The tow truck arrived exactly when Tyler had predicted, emblazoned with a different company logo. The driver, a burly man with tattoos covering his forearms, barely spoke as he hooked up Catherine's car. "All set," Tyler said, as the tow truck pulled away with Catherine's sedan. "You ladies can ride with us to the junkyard. We'll get that car fixed up in no time." Catherine and Linda hesitated by Tyler's pickup truck. Linda lingered by the rear bumper, her eyes narrowing as she studied the license plate. "You coming?" Tyler called, already climbing into the driver's seat with Nathan beside him. "Yes, of course," Catherine replied, opening the passenger door. Linda remained where she was, staring at the plate number. "Mom," Catherine called. With visible reluctance, Linda finally moved toward the truck. As she climbed into the back seat, she whispered very lowly in Catherine's ear, "I don't like this idea. I have a bad feeling about this. We should have called the police for help." Catherine patted her mother's hand reassuringly, but a flicker of doubt had ignited in her mind. Why had Tyler appeared so conveniently just as their car broke down? And why was he so insistent on taking them to the junkyard? "Actually, Tyler, I've changed my mind," she said. "It would be more helpful if you could drop us off at the police station instead of heading back to the junkyard." "Sure," Tyler said, his voice tight. As Tyler navigated through the streets, Catherine noticed that Linda was hunched over in the back seat, her hands hidden in her lap. She realized her mother was surreptitiously texting on her phone, shielding the screen from view. After about 15 minutes of driving, Catherine frowned, looking out the window at unfamiliar surroundings. "Tyler, this doesn't seem like the way to the police station." "Taking a shortcut," he replied, not meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Less traffic this way." Nathan, who had been mostly silent until now, turned in his seat to look back at them. His expression had hardened, all previous friendliness gone. "Tyler," Linda said sharply, "where are you taking us? This is not the way." Tyler's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. "Change of plans," he said, his voice suddenly cold. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, Nathan reached under his seat and pulled out a small handgun with what appeared to be a silencer attached. He also produced 2 sets of handcuffs. "Put these on," he ordered, holding out the handcuffs to Catherine and Linda. "Both of you. Now." Catherine stared at the gun in shock. "Tyler, what is this? What's going on?" "Put the handcuffs on," Nathan repeated, his voice harder this time. When they hesitated, he suddenly shouted, "Now, put them on or I'll shoot." His sudden aggression was terrifying, and both women flinched. With trembling hands, Catherine took the cold metal cuffs and snapped one end around her right wrist, then the other around her left. Beside her, Linda did the same. Nathan reached back again and roughly checked that the handcuffs were secure. Satisfied, he then produced 2 handkerchiefs from his pocket, balled them up, and shoved one into Catherine's mouth, then Linda's. "That pink bag," Nathan said, reaching over and snatching it from Linda's lap. "It's not yours anymore." He pushed both women harshly, forcing Catherine down onto the floor of the back seat, while Linda was shoved sideways across the back seat. Tyler's eyes met Catherine's in the rearview mirror, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Be quiet," he said coldly, "or you'll never see daylight again." As the truck continued down the increasingly rural road, Catherine's mind raced with terror. The pink backpack had been important enough to Tyler that he was willing to kidnap them for it. Whatever connection it had to Emma and Michael, Tyler was clearly desperate to keep that information hidden. Through her fear, Catherine caught Linda's eye. Her mother's expression communicated a clear message. "I texted someone. There's hope." Tyler turned the truck onto a narrow dirt road, trees closing in around them as they left civilization behind. Catherine closed her eyes briefly, praying that whoever Linda had contacted would find them before it was too late. The dirt road twisted through dense oak trees for several miles before opening onto a clearing. In the fading light of early evening, Catherine could make out a dilapidated farmhouse with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Nearby stood a battered camper trailer, its once white exterior now a dingy gray. No other vehicles were visible, and the property appeared isolated from any neighboring farms. Tyler parked the truck about 50 yards from the house and turned off the engine. Nathan kept the gun trained on Catherine and Linda as Tyler came around to open the back door. "Get out," he ordered, roughly pulling Catherine from the floor of the truck. Linda followed, her legs unsteady after being cramped in the back seat. With their hands cuffed in front of them and gags still in their mouths, the women were helpless as Tyler and Nathan marched them toward the farmhouse. As they passed the camper trailer, Catherine noticed it was rocking noticeably, as if someone inside was moving violently. Tyler nudged Nathan, snickering. "Looks like the boss is having his good time in there," he said, nodding toward the shaking trailer. Nathan laughed. "Yeah, we should wait until he's finished before giving him a new headache to deal with." He shoved Catherine forward. "These 2 women are going to be trouble." They continued to the farmhouse, climbing the creaking steps to the porch. Tyler pushed open the front door, revealing a dim interior that smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke. They were guided through a cluttered living room and down a hallway to what appeared to be an office. A desk with an old computer and telephone sat in one corner, while filing cabinets lined the opposite wall. An older man with graying hair sat in a chair near the window, reading a newspaper. He looked up as they entered, his weathered face expressionless. "Watch these 2. Tyler instructed him as Nathan removed the gags from Catherine and Linda's mouths. "We're going to get something to eat before the boss is done." The older man nodded, setting his newspaper aside. "Don't talk to the prisoners," Nathan added sharply. "Same as always." Tyler produced a length of chain, which he used to secure Catherine and Linda's handcuffs to a heavy metal radiator in the corner of the room. Once satisfied they couldn't escape, he and Nathan left, closing the door behind them. As soon as they were alone with the older man, Catherine began to plead. "Please, help us. We haven't done anything wrong. My daughter." The police detective, Doris, added desperately, "She'll find us. If you help us now, they'll go easier on you." The older man remained silent, picking up his newspaper again, but not actually reading it. "Please," Catherine continued, her voice cracking. "We're just trying to find my daughter and husband. They disappeared 14 years ago." For several minutes, they continued calling out, begging for help, explaining their situation. The older man ignored them, occasionally glancing toward the door as if worried someone might overhear. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the door opened. The older man stood quickly, looking alarmed, but it was only him coming back into the room. He approached them with a stern expression. "Be quiet," he hissed harshly. "Or they'll hurt you. You don't know what they're capable of." "Please," Linda said, her voice softer now. "I'm Linda Chen, and this is my daughter Catherine Morrison. We're looking for my granddaughter Emma Morrison. She was only 7 years old when she disappeared with her father 14 years ago. If she's here, please just let us know." The older man studied them with hard eyes, his expression unreadable. Then he glanced toward the hallway, listening for any sign of Tyler or Nathan returning. Apparently satisfied they were alone, his face softened, almost imperceptibly. "They call her Natalie in here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I knew her name was Emma, because that's what they called her before they changed her name 3 years ago." Catherine gasped, her knees nearly buckling. "She's here. My Emma is here." The older man nodded curtly. "Keep your voice down," he warned. "Please help us," Catherine begged, tears streaming down her face. "You look different from those people. I can see you're a good man." "I can be a dead man for being a good man now," he replied grimly. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "Our years are short anyway, sir," Linda said, her voice gentle but urgent. "Soon we're going to die and live in a different world according to our deeds. Please help us." The man seemed to wrestle with himself, conflict evident in his lined face. Then they heard footsteps in the hallway, and Linda whispered, "Please," once more. The older man exhaled heavily, as if making a momentous decision. "I do this for Natalie," he muttered. With trembling fingers, he quickly dialed 911, whispered the farmhouse's location, and hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket just as the door opened. 3 men entered the room. Tyler, Nathan, and a large, muscular man dressed only in a dirty white tank top and boxer shorts. His bare legs were covered in coarse hair, and his arms bore faded tattoos. Catherine felt sick just looking at him, especially when she realized this must be the boss Tyler had mentioned. "What are you doing in here, Marcus?" the boss demanded, his voice a deep rasp. "You're not supposed to be with the prisoners." The older man, Marcus, took a step back, his face suddenly fearful. "These women were noisy, brother. I was just telling them to be quiet, that's all." The boss studied him suspiciously, his eyes narrowing. "Search him," he ordered Tyler and Nathan. "If you find anything, deal with him." He fixed Tyler with a meaningful stare. "Can you do that?" Tyler nodded without hesitation. "Yes, boss." Tyler and Marcus left the room, leaving Catherine and Linda alone with Nathan and the boss. The large man approached them slowly, his eyes traveling over their bodies in a way that made Catherine's skin crawl. "So," he said, his voice thick with something that turned Catherine's stomach, "Tyler tells me you're here for Natalie." He reached out and touched Catherine's hair, then leaned in to smell it. "I like older women too, not just the young ones." Catherine jerked away from his touch, her handcuffs rattling against the radiator. "Give her back to us," she demanded, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed. The boss laughed, a deep, unsettling sound. "That can't happen, but I'll tell you what I can do." He turned to Nathan. "Bring them in." Nathan nodded and left the room, returning moments later with 3 women. They appeared to be in their early 20s, all with similar builds and long brown hair. They stood with their heads bowed, not making eye contact with anyone. "Here's the game," the boss announced, clearly enjoying himself. "Pick which one is Natalie. No discussion allowed. You both have to point at the same time, and if you both get it right, I'll let you see her. Just see her, mind you." He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. Catherine and Linda studied the 3 women desperately. They all had similar hair color to Emma, though they were now grown women rather than the 7-year-old girl Catherine had last seen. Catherine searched their faces for any hint of the daughter she had lost, any echo of the child she had raised. One woman standing slightly to the left had a small birthmark near her right ear, just like the one Emma had. Catherine's heart thundered in her chest as she raised her cuffed hands to point. 1, 2, 3, point, the boss shouted. Catherine and Linda both pointed to the same woman, the one with the birthmark. The boss's laughter filled the room. "Well, I'll be damned. Family really can tell each other apart, can't they?" He gestured to the other 2 women. "Take these 2 away." Nathan escorted the other women out, leaving the boss, Catherine, Linda, and the woman they'd identified as Emma, Natalie, in the room. "Emma," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "Sweetheart, is it really you?" The young woman didn't respond or even look up. Her expression remained blank, her eyes distant, as if she had retreated deep inside herself. "Now for the real fun," the boss said, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "Natalie, strip." Catherine and Linda gasped in horror. "No," Catherine cried. "Please don't do this to her." "Leave her alone," Linda added, her voice shaking with anger and fear. The boss ignored them, focusing on Natalie. "I said strip, now." To Catherine's horror, Natalie began to comply, her movements mechanical and her expression still vacant. She showed no emotion, no resistance, as if she had performed this act countless times before. "That's it," the boss encouraged, then suddenly held up his hand. "Wait, I have a better idea." He turned to Catherine with a cruel smile. More flavors would be nice. He approached Catherine and unlocked the chain from the radiator, though he left her handcuffs on. Grabbing her roughly by the arm, he dragged her to the center of the room, positioning her between Linda and Natalie. "I like older women too," he repeated, running a thick finger down Catherine's cheek. "Natalie, strip her for me." "No," Catherine gasped, looking desperately at the young woman. "Emma, I'm your mother, please." Natalie hesitated, something flickering briefly in her eyes, but her face remained expressionless as she took a step toward Catherine. Catherine tried to back away, but the boss held her firmly in place. "I like to play with my prey before consuming them," he said, laughing as Catherine struggled against his grip. With a sudden violent movement, he tore Catherine's blouse at the shoulder, exposing her skin. Catherine cried out, more from terror than pain, as the boss's hands began to roam over her body. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Tyler rushed in, his face pale. "Boss, police are outside." The boss froze, his expression shifting from lustful to furious in an instant. He shoved Catherine aside and grabbed Natalie's arm. "How the hell did they find us?" "They've surrounded the place," Tyler reported, his voice tight with fear. The boss swore violently, then turned to Tyler. "And these two." "Quickly," he ordered, gesturing to Catherine and Linda. "We'll escape out the back." Tyler hesitated. "There's no way out, boss. They've got the whole perimeter covered." Enraged, the boss grabbed the gun from Nathan's waistband. "Then I'll do it myself," he snarled, aiming the weapon at Catherine, who stood frozen in the middle of the room. Before he could pull the trigger, Marcus burst through the doorway and leapt in front of Catherine. 2 shots rang out in quick succession, and Marcus crumpled to the floor, blood spreading across his shirt. The boss tried to fire again, but the gun clicked empty. "Damn it," he roared, tossing the weapon aside. "Give me another!" Before anyone could move, the sound of splintering wood echoed through the farmhouse, followed by shouts of "Police, drop your weapons." Within seconds, armed officers flooded the room, their weapons trained on Tyler, Nathan, and the boss. Nathan immediately raised his hands in surrender, as did Tyler. The boss, however, lunged toward the nearest officer. A shot rang out, and the boss staggered back, clutching his thigh where the bullet had struck. Instead of falling, he laughed, a chilling, manic sound. "Do you know how many bullets I've taken in my life?" he taunted, blood seeping between his fingers. Another officer fired, striking him in the shoulder. This time, the boss fell to his knees, his face contorted with pain, but still defiant. As the officers secured the scene, handcuffing the 3 men, paramedics rushed to Marcus's side. Catherine, freed from her handcuffs by a female officer, immediately went to Natalie, who stood motionless in the chaos, her eyes vacant. "Emma," Catherine whispered, reaching out to touch her daughter's face. "It's me, it's Mom." There was no response, no recognition in those empty eyes. Whatever horrors Emma had endured over the past 14 years had left deep scars, not all of them visible. Linda, also freed from her restraints, joined them, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her granddaughter. "We found her, Catherine," she sobbed. "We finally found her." As the paramedics worked to stabilize Marcus and the police led the handcuffed criminals away, Catherine held her daughter close, silently vowing that whatever it took, however long it might be, she would help Emma find her way back from the darkness that had claimed her. The flashing lights of police cruisers and ambulances bathed the farmhouse property in alternating red and blue. Officers swarmed the area, securing the scene and collecting evidence while paramedics attended to the injured and traumatized. Catherine watched in a daze as Tyler, Nathan, and the man they called Boss were led from the farmhouse in handcuffs. Tyler kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, while Nathan stared straight ahead, his face expressionless. The boss, despite his gunshot wounds, continued to smirk and laugh as officers shoved him into a waiting police cruiser. "Ma'am, we need to get you checked out," a female paramedic said gently, guiding Catherine toward one of the ambulances. Linda was already seated on the bumper of another ambulance. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders as a medic examined the abrasions on her wrists from the handcuffs. Catherine allowed herself to be led, her eyes never leaving Natalie, Emma, who was being attended to by another paramedic. They had wrapped her in a thick blanket, and she sat motionless on a stretcher, staring at nothing. "You have a small laceration on your shoulder," the paramedic told Catherine, cleaning the area where the boss had torn her blouse. "It doesn't need stitches, but we should bandage it to prevent infection." Catherine barely heard her. "My daughter," she said, her voice hollow. "Is she all right?" The paramedic followed her gaze. "Physically, she appears uninjured," she said cautiously, "but she's not responding to questions. The doctor will want to evaluate her for psychological trauma when we get to the hospital." Catherine nodded numbly as the paramedic applied a bandage to her shoulder and wrapped a blanket around her. Across the yard, Linda had finished being examined and was making her way toward them, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes alert. "How is she?" Linda asked, nodding toward Emma. "In shock," Catherine replied, her voice breaking. "She doesn't recognize us, Mom." "Give her time," Linda said, squeezing Catherine's arm. "She's been through so much." A commotion near the farmhouse drew their attention. Paramedics were rushing a stretcher toward an ambulance. Marcus, the older man who had saved Catherine's life, his chest was covered in blood-soaked bandages, and one medic was holding an IV bag above him as they moved. "We need to leave immediately," one of the paramedics called out. "He's lost a lot of blood. We need to get the bullets out." As they loaded Marcus into the ambulance, a young officer approached Catherine and Linda. "The medics want to transport your daughter to the hospital right away," he explained. "She needs to be evaluated by specialists. They've advised you should be checked out more thoroughly as well." "Of course," Catherine said, her eyes still on Marcus's ambulance as the doors closed. "That man, Marcus, he saved my life. Will he be all right?" The officer's expression was carefully neutral. "They're doing everything they can for him. He's conscious and strong, according to the medics." As they walked toward the ambulance where Emma waited, another paramedic approached them. "Before we go," he said, "I thought you should know. Marcus was able to tell us a few things while we were treating him. He said his name is Marcus Bennett, and Tyler Bennett is his son." Catherine stopped in her tracks. "His son?" The paramedic nodded. "He also said Tyler works for Charlie Brennan, the big guy in the tank top. Apparently Brennan is Marcus's stepbrother." Linda shook her head in disbelief. That poor man. His own son abandoned him for a monster. "We need to go now," the paramedic said, guiding them toward the ambulance. "The detectives will speak with you at the hospital." Catherine and Linda climbed into the ambulance beside Emma, who sat still and unresponsive, her eyes fixed on some distant point. As the doors closed and the vehicle began to move, Catherine reached out tentatively to touch her daughter's hand. "Emma," she whispered, "we're here now. You're safe." There was no response, not even a flicker of recognition in those vacant eyes. Catherine exchanged a worried glance with Linda, who reached over to squeeze her shoulder supportively. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of sirens and lights. Upon arrival, they were separated, Emma taken to a treatment room for evaluation, while Catherine and Linda were guided to another area for more thorough examinations. When the doctors finally cleared them, they were led to a quiet consultation room to wait. Catherine sank into a chair, the events of the day catching up to her all at once. "I can't believe we found her," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "after all these years." "I know," Linda replied, taking the seat beside her. "It's like a miracle, but she's been through so much, Catherine. That awful man." Catherine closed her eyes, trying to block out the images of what they had witnessed at the farmhouse. They sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in her own thoughts, until the door opened and Detective Foster stepped in. "Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Chen, I'm glad to see you're both all right. This has been a shocking day for everyone involved." "Have you spoken with my daughter?" Catherine asked immediately. Detective Foster shook his head. "The doctors are still evaluating her. She's physically unharmed, but they're concerned about her psychological state." "What about Marcus?" Linda asked. "The man who saved us?" "He's in surgery," the detective replied. The doctors are optimistic, though. The bullets missed vital organs. And the men who took us? Catherine asked, her voice hardening. Tyler and Charlie Brennan, was it? Detective Foster nodded. All three are in custody. We've secured the pink backpack as evidence, and we're investigating the junkyard owner to see if he had any connection to Tyler's activities. Did Tyler or Nathan tell you anything? Linda pressed. About Michael and Emma? About what happened 14 years ago? We're still piecing everything together, Detective Foster said carefully. But we immediately recognized Charlie Brennan when we saw him. He's a wanted serial killer who's been evading capture for decades. He drifts from place to place under different aliases, manipulating people and harming them for his own entertainment. She hesitated. He often keeps young women and girls, controlling them through intimidation and abuse before he... Catherine felt physically ill at the thought of her daughter in that monster's hands for 14 years. How did Charlie cross paths with Michael and Emma? She asked, dreading the answer but needing to know. Tyler has been cooperative since his arrest. Said his time finally came, Detective Foster explained. He told us that he was 9 years old when it happened. He was with Charlie, his step-uncle, whom he idolized. Charlie presented himself as a strong male figure, unlike Tyler's father Marcus, whom Tyler viewed as weak and poor. The detective paused, checking her notes. According to Tyler, they were near Lake Whitney when they saw your husband's Lincoln. They pretended to be hitchhikers in need of help. Michael pulled over and offered them a ride. Charlie claimed Tyler was his son and wasn't feeling well. Michael even let them stay in an adjoining room at their motel in Fredericksburg. Catherine pressed a hand to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. It sounded exactly like something Michael would do. Always willing to help others, always trusting. That night, Detective Foster continued gently. Charlie drugged Michael's drink after they had spent the evening at a local diner. Once Emma was asleep, he strangled Michael in the motel bathroom. Linda let out a small cry of anguish, and Catherine reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. Charlie staged the scene to make it appear as if Michael had left voluntarily. He took Emma, telling her that her father was hurt and had been taken to the hospital. They left in a vehicle Charlie had hidden nearby. Over time, he manipulated Emma into believing her mother was gone too, and with forged documents and by constantly relocating, he kept her hidden, changing her name to Natalie. "And my husband's body?" Catherine asked, her voice barely audible. Tyler and Nathan admitted they stayed behind to clean up. Charlie disposed of Michael's body in a limestone quarry and drove the Lincoln deep into a wooded area where it remained hidden until recently. "Then how did it end up at the junkyard last week?" Linda asked. "Tyler brought it in," Detective Foster explained. "He knew where it had been abandoned all this time. With Charlie's influence, he decided to move it to the junkyard to destroy it, hoping to erase any connection to his uncle. He thought 14 years was long enough that no one would make the connection." Catherine sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had learned. Her husband had been murdered that very first night, while her daughter had endured 14 years of captivity and abuse. "We'll try to locate your husband's remains," Detective Foster said softly, based on Tyler's information about the location. Before Catherine could respond, the door opened and a doctor entered. "Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Chen, your daughter has been moved to a private room. She's still not speaking, but she's stable. I believe having you with her will be beneficial." They followed the doctor through the hospital corridors to a quiet room where Emma lay in a bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. She looked so small and fragile, despite being a grown woman now. Catherine approached the bed slowly, Linda right behind her. "Emma," she said softly, taking her daughter's hand. "It's Mom, and Grandma Linda is here too." For several long moments, there was no response. Catherine continued speaking gently, telling Emma that she was safe now, that Charlie and Tyler had been caught, that they would never let anyone hurt her again. Minutes stretched into an hour as Catherine and Linda took turns speaking to Emma, reminiscing about happy memories from her childhood, assuring her of their love. And then, just as Catherine was beginning to lose hope, Emma's lips parted. "I'm so sorry for being so broken," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. Tears sprang to Catherine's eyes. "It's not your fault, sweetheart," she said, her voice breaking. "None of this was your fault. We're together now. That's all that matters." "I miss Daddy," Emma said, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Something in her voice, in the way she said Daddy, reminded Catherine painfully of the 7-year-old girl who had left on that fateful road trip. Though Emma was 21 now, part of her seemed trapped in that moment, frozen in time. "I know, sweetheart," Catherine said, stroking her daughter's hair. "I missed him too." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, but Mr. Bennett is asking to see you. He's in the next room." Catherine hesitated, reluctant to leave Emma, but Linda touched her arm. "I'll stay with her, you go." Catherine followed the nurse to the adjacent room, where Marcus Bennett lay in a hospital bed, his chest heavily bandaged. He looked pale and weak, but his eyes were alert. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I wanted to apologize for my son and for myself, for staying quiet all these years." Catherine approached his bedside. "You saved my life," she said simply. "If not for your courage, we would still be in that farmhouse. We might never have found Emma." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "My son. He always hated gentle and kind men, saw it as weakness. So when they hitchhiked, pretending they needed help, and your husband helped them, he trailed off. They saw him as suitable prey because he was kind. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me," Marcus said quietly. Catherine reached out and gently squeezed his hand. "You risked your life to save us. There's nothing to forgive." Leaving Marcus to rest, Catherine returned to Emma's room. Her daughter had fallen asleep, her face peaceful for the first time since they'd found her. Linda sat beside the bed, watching over her granddaughter with tears in her eyes. Catherine took the chair on the other side of the bed, reaching out to hold Emma's hand. After 14 years of searching, of hoping against hope, they had found her. The road to healing would be long and difficult, but they would walk it together, one day at a time. As she watched her daughter sleep, Catherine silently thanked whatever forces had led them to that junkyard today, to the crushed blue Lincoln and the pink backpack that had finally brought her daughter home. The weeks that followed were a blur of police interviews, therapy sessions, and quiet moments at home, as Emma slowly began to reconnect with the world she'd been stolen from. The media descended on their story, but Detective Foster helped shield them from the worst of the attention. Tyler Bennett, Nathan Cole, and Charlie Brennan were all charged with multiple counts including kidnapping, murder, human trafficking, and attempted murder. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and prosecutors were confident all three would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Marcus Bennett recovered from his injuries and was granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony against his stepbrother and son. He had been living under Charlie's control for years, too afraid to speak out, but haunted by the crimes he'd witnessed. The pink backpack, confirmed through forensic analysis to be Emma's original bag from 1986, became a key piece of evidence in the trial. The heat-damaged tag and Emma's identification sticker, found hidden in a small interior pocket, proved that Tyler had deliberately kept it as some kind of trophy. Michael's remains were eventually located in the limestone quarry Tyler had described, allowing Catherine to finally lay her husband to rest properly, beside the empty grave that had marked his memory for so long. Emma's recovery was slow but steady. Dr. Sarah Klein, a trauma specialist who worked with trafficking survivors, helped Emma process the years of abuse and manipulation she'd endured. Some days were harder than others. Emma would retreat into silence or wake screaming from nightmares. But gradually, with love and patience and professional support, she began to emerge from the shell Charlie Brennan had forced her into. One evening, 6 months after her rescue, Emma sat with Catherine and Linda in the living room, looking through old photo albums. She paused at a picture of herself as a little girl, standing proudly with the pink backpack on her shoulders. "I remember this," Emma said softly. "The first time she'd voluntarily spoken about her life before the kidnapping. I loved that bag so much, I thought it made me look grown up." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "You saved your allowance for weeks to buy it." Emma nodded slowly. "When Charlie took it away from me, I think that's when I knew I wasn't going home. He said it was too childish, that Natalie didn't need silly things like that." She looked up at her mother. "But he kept it all these years. Tyler showed it to me once," said Charlie kept trophies from all his victims. Linda reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "You're not a victim anymore, sweetheart. You're a survivor." Emma managed a small smile. "Dr. Klein says that too. Some days I believe it. That's all we can ask," Catherine said, pulling her daughter into a gentle hug. "One day at a time." The trial began a year after Emma's rescue. Catherine, Linda, and Emma all testified about their ordeal, though Emma's testimony was given via closed-circuit video to protect her from having to face her abusers in person. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for all 3 defendants. Tyler Bennett and Nathan Cole were each sentenced to life in prison without parole. Charlie Brennan received 3 consecutive life sentences plus an additional 150 years. As the sentences were read, Catherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she'd been carrying for 14 years. Justice wouldn't bring Michael back, and it wouldn't erase what Emma had endured, but it meant that the men responsible would never hurt anyone else again. After the trial, Emma made the decision to legally change her name back from Natalie to Emma Morrison. It was a symbolic step, reclaiming the identity that had been stolen from her as a child. 2 years after her rescue, Emma enrolled in community college, studying psychology with the goal of eventually working with other trafficking survivors. Catherine worried it might be too much, but Dr. Klein encouraged it as a healthy way for Emma to find meaning in her experiences. "I can't change what happened to me," Emma told her mother one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. "But maybe I can help other people who went through similar things. Maybe that's how I make sense of it all." Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. "Your father would be so proud of you." Emma smiled, and for the first time since her rescue, the smile reached her eyes. "I think so too. Sometimes I feel like he's still with us, you know, watching over us." "Always," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Always." The pink backpack, after serving as evidence in the trial, was returned to the family. Catherine offered it to Emma, but her daughter shook her head. "I don't need it anymore," Emma said. "That's not who I am now. But maybe we could donate it to a museum or something, so people can learn about what happened, about how one small piece of evidence can break a case wide open." Catherine thought about it, then nodded. "I think that's a beautiful idea." The backpack eventually found a home in the Dallas Police Museum, displayed alongside information about the case and the importance of never giving up on missing persons investigations. It served as a reminder that sometimes the smallest details, a crushed car in a junkyard, a familiar backpack on a shelf, could be the key to solving even the coldest of cases. 5 years after Emma's rescue, the Morrison family had found a new rhythm. The scars remained, they always would, but healing was possible. Emma had graduated from community college and was working toward her bachelor's degree. Catherine had retired from her job to focus on volunteering with missing persons organizations, using their story to bring hope to other families still searching. Linda, now in her 70s, spent her days helping Catherine with advocacy work and doting on Emma, cherishing every moment with the granddaughter she'd thought she'd lost forever. Marcus Bennett, after his testimony helped convict his stepbrother and son, moved to a small town in East Texas to start over. He stayed in touch with the Morrisons, sending occasional letters to Catherine to check on Emma's progress. His relationship with his son was severed forever, but he found peace in knowing he'd finally done the right thing, even if it came far too late. On the 14th anniversary of Michael's death, the 16th anniversary of his disappearance, Catherine, Linda, and Emma visited his grave together. Emma placed fresh flowers at the headstone, her hand lingering on the carved letters of her father's name. "I wish I remembered him better," Emma said quietly. "I have flashes sometimes, his laugh, the way he smelled like peppermint, but it's all so faded." "That's normal," Catherine assured her. "You were so young, but I can tell you stories, show you videos, keep his memory alive for you." Emma nodded, then turned to look at her mother. "Thank you for never giving up, for never stopping looking for me." Catherine pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "I would have searched forever if I'd had to. You're my daughter. Nothing could ever change that." As the sun set over the cemetery, casting long shadows across the headstones, the 3 women stood together, bound by loss, strengthened by survival, and united by a love that even 14 years of separation couldn't break. The Junkyard discovery that had started it all, that crushed blue Lincoln Continental, had been the first thread in unraveling a decades-long mystery. But it was love, persistence, and a mother's refusal to give up hope that had truly brought Emma home. And though the journey had been painful and the scars ran deep, the Morrison family had learned that healing was possible, that justice could be served, and that even after the darkest night, morning eventually comes. They walked back to the car together, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, secure in the knowledge that this time they would face them as a family together, whole and unbreakable. "Hit a curb the week before they disappeared," she said, her voice distant. "We were going to get it fixed, but—" Her voice trailed off. She looked up at Detective Foster, her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "Yes, this is their car." Detective Foster nodded solemnly, then gestured to a man standing nervously at the edge of the crime scene. "This is Kyle Patterson, the owner of the Junkyard. He's the one who called us." Kyle stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag before offering one to Catherine. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I had no idea about the car's history. I swear it was scheduled to be crushed this morning, and I was in my office afterward when I saw the missing persons segment on TV. I recognized the car immediately and called the police." "How did it get here?" Catherine demanded, ignoring his outstretched hand. "Who brought it in?" Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "That's just it, ma'am. I don't have any record of it being brought in. It's not in our system at all." "That sounds suspicious," Linda said sharply. Detective Foster held up a hand. "Mr. Patterson was the one who alerted us to the car's presence. Mrs. Chen, we have no reason to believe he was involved in its appearance here." "I've been trying to figure out how it got here myself," Kyle insisted. "We have strict protocols for accepting vehicles, paperwork, IDs, the works." As he spoke, a woman in greasy overalls approached the group. "I saw Tyler bring it in," she said. All eyes turned to her. "Tyler?" Detective Foster asked. "Tyler Bennett," Kyle explained. "He's my partner, runs the technical side of things. He's the head technician here." Detective Foster immediately pulled out his phone. "We need to speak with him. Can you call him?" Kyle nodded and pulled out his own phone, dialing a number. After several moments, he shook his head. "No answer." "I'll need his home address," Detective Foster said firmly. "Of course," Kyle replied, pulling out a small notebook from his pocket and writing down an address. "He lives in North Dallas. Here's his information." Detective Foster took the paper and turned to one of his officers. "I want a unit sent to this address immediately. Have them bring Mr. Bennett in for questioning." He turned back to Kyle. "Is there anything else of Mr. Bennett's on the premises that might be relevant to our investigation?" "His office," Kyle said. "But it's locked, and only Tyler has the key." "We'll need a warrant to search it properly," Detective Foster said, turning to another officer. "Get that in motion." Catherine stood silently through this exchange, her eyes never leaving the crushed Lincoln. 14 years of wondering, of hoping against hope. And now this. The car that had carried her husband and daughter away from her for the last time was here, crushed beyond recognition, but no sign of Michael or Emma. "Let's search the area," Detective Foster instructed his team. "Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Chen, if you feel up to it, your help in identifying any potential personal items would be invaluable." Catherine nodded mutely, and she and Linda followed the officers as they began to methodically search the junkyard. Hours passed as they examined piles of scrap metal and discarded items, but nothing related to Michael or Emma surfaced. Eventually they found themselves outside Tyler Bennett's locked office, waiting for either the man himself or the warrant that would allow them to search it. Catherine leaned against the wall, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Linda stood beside her, one arm wrapped around her daughter's shoulders, both women silent and deep in thought as the afternoon sun climbed higher in the sky. The sun reached its peak when 2 police cruisers pulled into the junkyard. Catherine and Linda straightened as they saw a third vehicle, a dark green pickup truck, following behind. The truck parked a short distance away, and a man in his mid-20s climbed out. He had short brown hair and wore work clothes with the junkyard's logo emblazoned on the breast pocket. Detective Foster approached him immediately. "Mr. Bennett?" The man nodded, a look of confusion on his face. "Yes, that's me. What's going on?" "The officer said you needed to speak with me urgently." "I'm Detective Foster," the detective said, extending his hand. "We're investigating the appearance of a blue Lincoln in your junkyard, one that's connected to a 14-year-old missing persons case." Tyler's eyes widened slightly. "The car that was crushed this morning. I heard Kyle called you guys about it." Detective Foster nodded toward Catherine and Linda. "This is Catherine Morrison and her mother, Linda Chen. The Lincoln belonged to Mrs. Morrison's husband, who disappeared with their daughter 14 years ago." Tyler approached the women, his expression appropriately somber. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Tyler Bennett." He offered his hand, which Catherine took after a moment's hesitation. "The car wasn't properly logged into your system," Detective Foster continued. "One of your coworkers said she saw you bring it in. We'd like to know how it came into your possession." Tyler ran a hand through his hair, sighing.
"Yeah, that was a weird situation.
"About a week ago, an older man brought it in when Kyle wasn't around. Said he didn't have any use for the car anymore and wanted it destroyed." "Did he give you his name?" Detective Foster asked. Tyler shook his head. No, and that's what was strange. He paid cash, a good amount too. But when I tried to get his information for our records, he just ran off, literally left the keys in the ignition and walked away. I called after him, tried to chase him, but he was gone. Can you describe this man? Detective Foster pressed. Tyler furrowed his brow in concentration. Tall, maybe 6 feet, thin build, gray hair though it looked like it might have been dark before. He had a mustache, a thick one, wore glasses, khaki pants, and a button-up shirt. Spoke real quiet, almost hard to hear him. Catherine's breath caught audibly. That sounds like Michael, she whispered to Linda, her face pale. What? Linda said too loudly. But that's impossible. Detective Foster turned to them. Mrs. Morrison, are you saying this description matches your husband? Catherine nodded slowly, her hands trembling. It could be. The height, the build, the mustache. Michael always wore button-ups, even on weekends. Detective Foster looked back at Tyler. How old would you say this man was? Hard to tell, Tyler replied. Maybe 50s, could have been younger though. He looked tired, weathered, you know. Linda shook her head vigorously. This doesn't make sense. Why would Michael get rid of the Lincoln? He loved that car. He worked so hard for it. And why now? Catherine added, her voice stronger. After 14 years, and where is Emma? Detective Foster held up a calming hand. Let's not jump to conclusions. We need to investigate further. He turned back to Tyler. We'd like to search your office, Mr. Bennett. One of your co-workers mentioned you keep it locked. Tyler nodded. Yeah, of course. Nothing to hide. It's just that we keep some valuable tools and parts catalogs in there. Follow me. As they walked toward the small building that housed the Junkyard's offices, Catherine and Linda exchanged troubled glances. Do you really think it could have been Michael? Linda whispered. Catherine shook her head. I don't know. It sounds like him. But why would he abandon the car after all this time? And where has he been? Where's Emma? I don't believe Michael would do that. Maybe this man is trying to confuse us, Linda suggested, her voice low. When they reached the office building, Tyler led them to a door at the end of a short hallway. He pulled out a ring of keys and unlocked it, stepping aside to let Detective Foster enter first. Please wait out here, Detective Foster told Catherine and Linda. We'll let you know if we find anything of interest. As the police entered the office, Linda suddenly clutched at her chest, her breathing becoming labored. Mom, Catherine said, alarmed. What's wrong? My asthma, Linda gasped, fumbling in her purse. I think the stress, my inhaler. Catherine helped her to a nearby bench. She found the inhaler at the bottom of Linda's purse and helped her mother use it, watching anxiously as Linda's breathing gradually steadied. I'm okay, Linda insisted after a few minutes, though her face remained pale. Just overwhelmed. I'm sorry for the trouble. Would you like us to call an ambulance? Detective Foster had rushed to her side. Linda shook her head firmly. No, I'll be fine. Just need to rest a bit. While Catherine tended to her mother, the search of Tyler's office continued. Occasionally, an officer would emerge with an item to show Catherine and Linda, but each time Catherine shook her head. None of the items belonged to Michael or Emma. After nearly an hour, Detective Foster emerged from the office for the final time. We've completed our search, he told Catherine and Linda. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything directly connected to your husband or daughter. Catherine's shoulders slumped with disappointment. So we're no closer to understanding what happened. We've made progress, Detective Foster assured her. Finding the Lincoln is significant. Now we need to figure out who brought it here and why. He turned to Tyler. Mr. Bennett, we'd like you to come to the station to make a formal statement. Tyler nodded. Of course. Whatever I can do to help. Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Chen, we'd appreciate it if you'd come as well, Detective Foster continued. We'd like to review the case details with you in light of this new evidence. We'll come with you, Catherine said firmly. I'll drive my own car, Tyler offered. I'm heading back toward Dallas anyway. Detective Foster considered this for a moment, then nodded. That's fine. We'll expect you there within the hour. As they walked back to the police cruiser, Catherine supported her mother, who was still slightly unsteady on her feet. Are you sure you're up for this? Catherine asked quietly. Linda squeezed her daughter's arm. I wouldn't miss it for the world. If there's even a chance of finding out what happened to Michael and Emma, I need to be there. They climbed into the back seat of the cruiser, watching as Tyler got into his pickup truck. As the small convoy pulled out of the junkyard, The sun blazed high in the clear afternoon sky, casting sharp shadows across the crushed blue Lincoln. The fluorescent lights of the Dallas Police Department cast harsh shadows across the faces of everyone seated in the small conference room. Catherine and Linda sat on one side of the table, Detective Foster and another officer across from them, while Tyler Bennett had given his statement in a separate room. "Let's go through the timeline again," Detective Foster said, opening a thick file folder. "Sometimes fresh eyes on old details can reveal something we've missed." Catherine nodded, her hands clasped tightly on the table. Michael and Emma left on a Saturday morning, November 8, 1986. Michael had his dental practice here in Dallas. He was well respected, had built it from nothing. He had this distinctive style about him, the mustache, his colorful ties. His patients loved him. "And Emma?" Detective Foster prompted gently. A small smile touched Catherine's lips. She was 7, so bright, so full of energy. She adored her father, followed him everywhere when she wasn't in school. "You didn't go on the trip with them?" the second officer asked, making notes. Catherine shook her head. "Mom needed help that weekend. She was moving some furniture, rearranging her house after Dad passed. It was supposed to be just one night, a quick trip to Fredericksburg." Michael wanted to show Emma the fall foliage in the hill country, maybe visit Enchanted Rock. They were supposed to be back Sunday evening. "And when did you first realize something was wrong?" Detective Foster asked, though he surely knew the answer from the file before him. "Sunday night," Catherine replied, her voice growing distant. "Michael had promised to call when they left Fredericksburg. When I hadn't heard from him by dinner time, I tried the motel. They said Michael and Emma had checked out that morning. I called his friends, relatives. No one had heard from them. By Monday morning, I went to the police." Linda reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "We've been looking ever since." Detective Foster nodded solemnly. The investigation at the time was thorough. Officers checked surveillance footage from gas stations, stores along their route. They interviewed the motel staff, diners in the area. Michael's credit cards and bank accounts were never used again. His dental practice remained untouched. "The technology back then wasn't what it is now," the second officer added. "No cell phones to track, fewer cameras. We did what we could." "And now, 14 years later, his car shows up in a junkyard," Catherine said, her voice tight with emotion. "Brought in by a man who matches Michael's description." A heavy silence fell over the room. Detective Foster closed the file folder and leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Morrison, I have to ask, is it possible that your husband left voluntarily?" Catherine stiffened. "Absolutely not. We had a good marriage. He adored Emma. His practice was thriving. There was no reason for him to leave." "People sometimes have secrets," Detective Foster said gently. "Lives they keep hidden from even those closest to them." "Not Michael," Catherine insisted. "And even if that were true, which it isn't, he would never have taken Emma from me. Never." The door to the conference room opened and a female officer entered. "Tyler Bennett's statement has been processed," she informed Detective Foster. "He's waiting in the lobby." Detective Foster nodded. "Thank you." He turned back to Catherine and Linda. "We'll continue investigating this new lead. The car will be thoroughly examined, and we'll try to trace its movements over the past 14 years. In the meantime, I recommend you both go home and get some rest. It's been a long day." Catherine glanced at her watch, surprised to see it was past 2 p.m. "Yes, I suppose we should." "We can have an officer drive you," Detective Foster offered, standing. They made their way to the station lobby where Tyler was sitting in a plastic chair, scrolling through his phone. He stood when he saw them approaching. "All done?" he asked. "Yes," Catherine replied. "Thank you for your cooperation." Detective Foster nodded. "For now, we'll be in touch if we have more questions, Mr. Bennett." Tyler glanced at Catherine and Linda. "I could give you a ride. I live in the Lake Highlands area." Detective Foster looked dubious. "That's not necessary, Mr. Bennett. We can arrange." But before the detective could finish, a uniformed officer approached Detective Foster with an urgent message, drawing him away from the group. In his absence, Catherine assessed their situation. Her mother was exhausted, and they faced a longer wait for a police escort or a taxi. "We'd appreciate the ride," Catherine decided, ignoring the flicker of unease in her stomach. Tyler had cooperated fully with the police, and they knew where he worked. There was no rational reason to refuse. "I'll let Detective Foster know," she added, stepping away to speak with the detective who was still engaged with the officer. "Are you sure about this?" Linda whispered when Catherine returned. The police have his information. It'll be fine. Detective Foster returned, looking reluctant but resigned when Catherine informed him of their decision. I've got his license plate and contact information, he assured them. Call immediately if there's any problem. Tyler's pickup was old but well maintained. He opened the passenger door for Linda, helping her climb into the cab, then waited as Catherine settled into the middle seat. Where in Lake Highlands are you? Tyler asked as they pulled out of the police station parking lot. Skillman near Walnut Hill, Catherine replied, keeping her tone neutral. Tyler nodded. I'm on Abrams, not far from there at all. Funny, we've never crossed paths before. But thank you again for the ride, Catherine said. The afternoon in Dallas was relatively quiet as they headed north. Tyler maintained a casual conversation, asking about the neighborhood, commenting on changes to the city over the years. Suddenly, Linda gasped and began patting her pockets and purse. What's wrong, Mom? Catherine asked, alarmed. My inhaler, Linda said, her voice tight with worry. I think I left it at the Junkyard office when I had that attack earlier. Are you feeling okay? Catherine asked, concerned. I'm fine now, Linda assured her, but I need that inhaler. It's my prescription one and I just got it last week. It was expensive. Tyler glanced over at them. I have asthma too. If you need an inhaler, I have a spare at my place. We could swing by and pick it up. Catherine shook her head. That's very kind, but maybe we could just stop at a pharmacy. There must be one somewhere. It's a prescription inhaler, Linda insisted. I don't want to waste money on another one when mine is probably sitting on a desk at the junkyard. We could just go back and get it. Now, Catherine asked, surprised, but the junkyard is an hour away. I don't mind driving you back, Tyler offered. Really, it's no trouble. We can be there and back in a couple of hours. We couldn't ask you to do that, Catherine protested. Linda shook her head firmly. That would be so expensive, Catherine. Mr. Bennett is offering to help us. Please, call me Tyler, he said. And seriously, I don't mind. That junkyard is practically my second home. Catherine looked at her mother's determined face and sighed. If you're sure, Mom? I am, Linda said. I don't want to waste a perfectly good inhaler. It's settled then, Tyler said, signaling to turn around at the next intersection. Back to Waco we go. The dashboard clock showed 3:05 p.m. as Tyler's pickup truck pulled into Patterson's auto salvage. The police had finished processing the scene, though the crushed Lincoln remained cordoned off with yellow tape. Only a few employees were still working, moving parts and organizing scrap metal in the distance. The three of them climbed out of the truck and made their way to the main office. Kyle Patterson was behind the counter, looking surprised to see them again. Tyler, Mrs. Morrison, I thought you all left with the police hours ago. We did, Tyler explained, but Mrs. Chen believes she left her inhaler here during her asthma attack earlier. Kyle's face softened with understanding. Oh, I see. Yes, actually, I found it after everyone left. I put it in Tyler's office for safekeeping, figuring he'd know how to get it back to you. How thoughtful, Linda said. Would you mind if I get it now? It's my prescription one, and I'd hate to have to replace it. Of course, Kyle replied. Tyler, you've got the key. Tyler nodded, fishing his key ring from his pocket. Catherine and Linda walked down the hallway toward Tyler's office. He told them he'd just step inside to grab the medication. Catherine sank into one of the worn plastic chairs, her exhaustion from the day's events clearly etched on her face. Linda, however, paced just outside the doorway. As Tyler opened the door and disappeared inside, Linda frowned, narrowing her eyes with suspicion as if something had caught her attention. How are you holding up, Mom? Catherine asked quietly, taking the seat beside her. I'm okay, Linda assured her, just a bit overwhelmed by everything. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the distant clanging of metal from the junkyard. A few minutes passed, and Catherine found herself growing restless. What's taking him so long? It's just an inhaler. Linda shifted in her seat, then suddenly straightened, her eyes widening. Catherine, she whispered urgently, when Tyler opens the door to come out, look at the top shelf of the glass cabinet across from the door. What? Why? Catherine asked, confused by her mother's sudden intensity. I caught a glimpse when he went in. Linda explained hurriedly. I think I saw a pink backpack up there between some books. It looks like Emma's. Catherine's heart skipped a beat. That's impossible, Mom. Emma's bag was with her when she disappeared. Just look, Linda insisted. It's the exact same shade of pink. Before Catherine could respond, the sound of footsteps announced Tyler's return. As the office door swung open, both women instinctively looked past him into the office. Through the doorway, Catherine could see a glass-fronted cabinet against the far wall, and there, on the top shelf, nestled between several technical manuals, was a small pink backpack, exactly the shade that Emma had carried with her everywhere. Tyler stepped out, holding Linda's inhaler. "Found it on my desk," he said, handing it to her. Catherine couldn't take her eyes off the glimpse of pink visible through the closing door. "Tyler," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "that pink bag in your office?" Tyler turned, following her gaze back to his office. "Oh, that old thing." He sounded casual, but Catherine noticed a slight stiffening in his posture. "It looks exactly like my daughter's," Catherine said, "the one she had with her when she disappeared." Tyler hesitated for just a moment. "Really? That's quite a coincidence." "Would you mind if I took a closer look?" Catherine asked, already rising from her chair. Tyler seemed to consider this for a moment, then shrugged. "Sure, I guess. It's nothing special, just an old bag that belonged to my daughter." "I didn't know you had a daughter," Kyle commented from behind the counter. Tyler shot him a quick look. "She's not with us anymore. She lives with her mother in Houston." Catherine and Linda followed Tyler back to his office. He unlocked the door again and went straight to the cabinet, reaching up to retrieve the pink backpack from the top shelf. "Here it is," he said, handing it to Catherine. "My daughter wasn't much of a girly girl, but she got this for her birthday 1 year from school. Never really liked it or wanted to use it, so I just kept it here." Catherine took the bag with trembling hands. It was exactly the same size and style as the one she'd bought for Emma in 1986, a small rectangular backpack with white trim and a simple clasp. Emma had saved her allowance for weeks to buy it, insisting it was grown up enough for her to carry everywhere. "This looks like a vintage piece," Catherine said carefully, turning the bag over in her hands. "What year did your daughter receive this?" Tyler shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Oh, I don't remember exactly. Few years back. It's identical to a bag that was popular in the early 80s, Linda remarked, watching Tyler's face closely. "I'm surprised they still make them in this style." "Yeah, well, you know how fashion cycles back around," Tyler said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Vintage is in again, I guess." Catherine opened the bag, but it was empty. She examined the interior carefully, running her fingers along the lining. "It's in remarkably good condition for a child's bag. Like I said, she barely used it," Tyler replied. "You can keep it if you want. I've just been keeping it here gathering dust." Catherine's head snapped up. "You'd give away your daughter's birthday present?" Tyler shrugged. "It's not like she's missing it. Besides, if it brings you some comfort, reminds you of your daughter, why not?" "That's very generous," Catherine said slowly. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Tyler said, his expression unreadable. "Didn't the police see this when they searched your office earlier?" Linda asked suddenly. Tyler nodded. "Yeah, they looked at everything. I told them it was my daughter's, and they moved on. Just a personal item. Nothing suspicious about it." Linda took the bag from Catherine and turned it over, examining it more closely. Inside, she found a small white ribbon tag sewn into the lining. She squinted at it, then frowned. "There's no manufacturer information on this tag," she said, showing it to Catherine. "It looks like something was printed here before, but it's been erased somehow." Catherine leaned in to look. Sure enough, the white tag bore faint traces of what might have once been text, but it was now impossible to read. "That's strange," she murmured, then looked up at Tyler. "What kind of birthday present doesn't have any tags or branding?" "I wouldn't know," Tyler said, a hint of impatience creeping into his voice. "It was given by a friend at her school." Catherine ran her fingers over the material of the bag again, noting the familiar texture and weight of it. It felt exactly like Emma's bag, the one she'd been so proud to carry, the one she insisted on taking everywhere, even on that final road trip with her father. "We'll keep it," Linda announced suddenly, clutching the bag to her chest. "If you're sure it's okay." "Like I said, it's just gathering dust here," Tyler repeated, gesturing toward the door. "Now if there's nothing else, I should probably be getting you two back to Dallas." As they walked back through the junkyard toward Tyler's truck, Catherine and Linda exchanged meaningful glances. Neither spoke until they were seated in the vehicle, and Tyler had stepped away briefly to speak with Kyle. "It's Emma's bag," Linda whispered urgently. "I'm sure of it. The tag has been tampered with to remove the brand and production year." Catherine nodded, her mind racing. But how would Tyler have Emma's bag, and why would it be in his office? I don't know, Linda replied. But something isn't right here. First, Michael's car shows up in this junkyard, brought in by Tyler, and now this bag that looks exactly like Emma's is in his office. Let's not jump to conclusions, Catherine cautioned. Though her own suspicions were mounting, this could all be a strange coincidence. Do you really believe that? Linda asked, her eyes piercing. Before Catherine could respond, Tyler climbed back into the driver's seat. All set? He asked cheerfully, as if the strange encounter with the pink backpack had never happened. Yes, Catherine replied, forcing a smile. Thank you again for your help today. Tyler started the engine and pulled out of the junkyard. As they headed back toward Dallas, Catherine clutched the pink backpack in her lap, her fingers tracing the familiar contours. The day had stretched into late afternoon as Tyler's pickup truck rejoined the northbound traffic on Interstate 35. Catherine sat in the passenger seat, the pink backpack clutched tightly in her lap, while Linda occupied the back seat, her newly recovered inhaler safely tucked into her purse. The silence in the car felt weighted with unspoken questions. Catherine's mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. How could Tyler have a bag so identical to Emma's, and why had he been so eager to give it away? I can't thank you enough for all your help today, Catherine said finally, breaking the silence. It's been quite a day. Tyler nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. Happy to help. Finding that car must have been quite a shock for you both. 14 years of wondering, Catherine said softly, and then to find Michael's car like that. Tell me about them, Tyler said, his voice casual. Your husband and daughter, what were they like? Catherine hesitated, studying Tyler's profile. His expression seemed genuinely interested, but something about the question made her uneasy. Still, talking about Michael and Emma had always been a way to keep their memory alive. Michael was a wonderful dentist, she began. He had this way,